Hey.
Is he on?
We're doing it. Yeah, is it coming through?
Leave, there's a dog.
Is it all good? Oh.
Yeah.
Good to go?
I'm just gonna, I started the whole.
Oh, okay.
I couldn't get it on the website that I did earlier. So just keep it going.
Wow. Well, let me just ask. Hey, Susan.
No service now?
Jeff says he doesn't see it on Justin TV right now.
Okay, just have him,
Just hold on. We're working on
just
it.
have him keep trying. It'll come through.
Keep
Their
trying.
servers are busy right now.
It's going to come through, she
Yeah.
said. Oh. Oh, wow. Susan, he says that the website is so busy he can't even use the open door web page.
Yeah, I know. It's very busy right now. We just have to keep trying.
Please keep trying.
Yeah, just keep trying. It'll come through.
I'll talk to you. Yeah. Okay, so I'll talk to you later. I gotta run.
I just want to stop that.
Oh, we'll go with it.
What about you?
Cricket.
I got a better idea first. Already exists. Totally live.
That's great.
Oh, yeah.
Where?
Oh, really?
Welcome, everybody. The goal of all questing, the only thing worth achieving is right here, right now, what this is. And there's nothing whatsoever other than it here. There's nothing in the way of this. This is nakedly, apparently what it is, and it is not blocking itself. It is completely transparently what it is. And there's nothing whatsoever that can be found anywhere else. And yet, what exactly is this? What exactly is it? And what are the implications of it being what it is? Can we notice what it is? Can we appreciate what it is? Or do we get sucked into our relatively unsophisticated interpretations of what we think is actually happening here, which then blind us to noticing what is actually happening, and possibly blind us to appreciating it and taking advantage of its astounding bounty. So what would you like to talk about tonight?
Peter, when you do music, because you do music, I believe.
Yeah.
When you do music, is your music informed any by your sense of reality, which may not be what other people have? Does your music change any?
Everybody has nothing but sense of reality.
I'm sorry, I slipped into that one. But,
Yes, certainly. Everything that happens, these words we're saying is informed by the sense of reality. You know, what we're seeing is informed by the sense of reality. The way we move, the way we breathe is all informed by and constituted by nothing other than reality itself.
do you notice any difference in your music, say now, than what you would have played 30 years ago or 20 years ago?
I'm perhaps a little less heedless of criticism. I give less of a shit what other people think.
What do they think?
More people.
I don't know that. I don't know what I think, so what someone else thinks is.
Because music is something to, at least as I do a little music too, not professionally, of course, just something. But to find where the source of that music is coming, if you're improvising or even if you're composing, is about as difficult and probably parallel to finding the source of any thought rising.
It's exactly the same.
Right.
And it's exactly the same. And that's where to look. Where's this present moment coming from?
Yeah.
I mean, it's appearing. Where's it coming from? Where are these thoughts that are popping into our mind coming from?
Right.
You know, it's not somewhere far away. It's not somewhere way over there. It's coming from somewhere right here. How is that happening? You know, that's the mystery. It's right here, and it's plain to see. Just don't try to think of it in human terms. To see this spontaneous, you know, I mean, there's no words for it. Spontaneous eruption or spontaneous radiance. That bang, there's a thought there. Bang, there's words here. Bang, there's light in my field of vision. You know, how's that happening? And as that's happening, what is actually happening? We can see it. We can see it nakedly. It's right here.
And I can see a qualitative difference between one moment and the next. In other words, I get in my own way sometimes. Sometimes it comes more naturally and comes up and surprises me. And the qualities may be different than when I'm contriving and organizing, mentally.
Mm-hmm. And yet, where does the contrivance come from? How does that happen? What is it made of? What does it consist of?
Right.
What substance is it? What literally is it made of? As you think these thoughts or have these sort of visions or something, what is that made of? Where is it occurring? What energy is informing it? We can see. We just don't expect to be able to name it in human terms. But you can see what it is, and when you see what it is, it'll show you in greater depth, more and more, what that is. This energy that actually constitutes our experience, not in a metaphorical way or in a poetic way, but literally the energy that constitutes our experience, that's showing up as light in your field of vision, that's showing up as sound, that's showing up as thought in your field of mentality, that's showing up as sensation in the field of touch. The energy that literally is made of right here. It's not somewhere abstract and under layers of needing to dig down to find it. It's right here. It's completely naked on the surface. What this energy actually is the mystery. It's astounding. We don't to look to find the mystery. You don't need to close your eyes and stop thinking for 50 years in a cave in the Himalayas. Just look at this. What is this? What is this light? What is this thought? It's an astounding, inconceivable, indescribable, infinite, spontaneously present, magical, infinite energy of some kind, of the kind that it is. And we can see it, it's right here. And it will show us what it is when we look at it without preconception. If you look at it with preconception, you're just going to see your preconceptions. You know, if I think, oh, this is just a room, you know, we're just a bunch of people and we're sitting around talking, all of a sudden that's all I see. It's like a horse with blinders. All of a sudden it's just a room and a bunch of people talking. You know, but if I don't know what it is, if I don't know if it's a room, what's a room? I don't know what people are. Certainly, you know, what's a person? I mean, there's a conundrum. You know, what's talking? All of a sudden, then what is this? What's it made of? How's it happening? What is this astounding phenomena we call experience? Yeah. But it will show us what it is when you approach it humbly and without preconception, as opposed to arrogantly, where you're telling it what it is. We come with arrogance and, oh, I know what's going on here, I know who I am, I know what the world is, I know what's happening here. But from that perspective, you aren't going to see anything but your thoughts and your ideas. You know, but if you come to it, I don't know what this is a mystery, show me what you are. And you'll see what it is, because it is what it is, it's not hiding. There's nothing in the way of it and experiencing. It's completely naked, it's completely present. And what it is astounding. What it is, you know, it's off the charts in terms of inconceivability. And we can notice that almost right away, you know, when you begin to look at, oh, what is this energy? What is this energy that's showing up? And you glance at the sun, what is that? What is this? You know, you glance at the light source, what is this? You know, look into someone's eyes, you know, what is that? You know, but it's not hidden. Just look and see what it is. You know, but there's no human words for it.
If I put a million inconceivable things together, does that make them commonplace?
Find out for yourself. Perhaps.
And that's the world, basically. All this inconceivable stuff.
Well, commonplace isn't made of the objects which constitute it. Commonplace is made of the assumption that those objects are shallow and limited and you already know what they are, so they're no longer interesting. You know, if I know what a room is, then I stop being interested in rooms. If I know what a person is, I stop being interested in people. But it's a fallacy. You can't know what anything is. It's a fact you cannot actually know what anything is, because all phenomena are inherently infinite. Which means that if you look into them, you'll always find more. And if you look more, you'll find more, forever. So that is a condition of unlimitedness. It's a condition of infinity. So you can't. How can you know what something is when you always can learn more about it? It has no boundary. It has no edge. It has no demarcation. It's like a bottomless pool. It's like infinite, just like deep space.
It's deeper than that because it's self-causing, and so it's kind of continuously, infinitely causing itself.
Sure.
This is the so-called creative power of God, without which nothing would exist like that. And since that's what's creating everything, it makes it what is called non-fractional. You can't break it up into pieces because there's nothing to. If you did that, then you'd be trying to interfere with the causal mechanism.
Well, you can't break anything up into pieces. It's not a matter of interfering or not interfering. Because pieces suppose that you have to have some continuity or structure there so you can break it up. And say in a dream, you were dreaming last night, how would you break the dream up into pieces? Could you break anything in the dream up into pieces? There's no holes there, so there has to be a hole there in order for you to make pieces. It looks like there's holes. You might be dreaming and you see a car there and you could imagine, oh, I'm going to break this car up into pieces. But in fact, there's no car there, so there's no pieces there, so you didn't break anything up into pieces. And that's the situation we find ourselves in here. There's no objects, there's just experience. And the consciousness is free to interpret the experience as consisting of objects, but it's exactly analogous to the dreaming consciousness interpreting its experience as consisting of objects. And when we wake up in the morning, we know perfectly well there were no objects there. You can have the most intricate dream in the world, and you wake up in the morning and you know for a fact there were no objects there. It was a dream. It's experience. It was made of experience itself. You know, the mystery, the magical creative power of consciousness. In what way is that any different than this?
Let me ask you a different question. It occurs to me that there are some people who have these practices of trying to bridge into dreams, the way you can bridge between quote dream and quote reality. And it occurred to me this afternoon, I said to myself, well, that's interesting, because if this world is actually something I'm generating anyway, then it should be almost trivial to bridge from one dream into another, essentially.
Maybe yes, maybe no. Do it.
Well, it's just a matter of saying. You say to yourself, well, okay, now, it seems absurd that I could dream, you know, that I was...
Well, what's the point?
Tucson, Arizona.
What's the point? Why do this or not do this? Or I mean, whether or not you can do this is...
Because it's there.
Well, fine. Then that comes under the category of amusement. So go for it. It's like learning to water ski, you know. Cool.
Right. Right. But it sounds like it would be much easier than it sounds, because actually you're just bridging into yourself.
Maybe water skiing isn't easy either. Give it a shot.
I've never tried it.
Yeah.
I was listening to a satsang online this week, and the guy said this awareness is like a tree. It's like how a tree is aware of the water table underneath the ground. Which was just really surprising to me, because maybe you'll comment on that. I mean,
how does this person know what a tree or senses experiences the water table has been?
Well, yes, I mean, but it had a instructive quality to it, even if that's true that we can't know about the tree. In that I realized that the awareness, what I've been seeing as awareness, feeling as awareness, was very much mental. I mean, I had a lot of mental, it was kind of up here. And that what happened then, it sort of dropped down as if, and made me feel like this awareness is actually not a cultivated thing, but a native thing. I mean, it's like a...
Yeah. The spiritually interesting awareness, I mean, the word awareness can be applied to all kinds of things, but the spiritually interesting awareness is intrinsic. You can't make it stronger, you can't make it weaker, you can't start it, you can't stop it, you can't damage it, you can't do anything. The spiritually interesting awareness is what this present moment is appearing in. Can you stop this present moment?
No.
Can you turn off can you somehow become unaware of the present moment?
No.
And that's the interesting awareness. It doesn't have, you can't say anything about it because it's the ground state that everything appears in. So you can't analogize it as being related to anything whatsoever, because everything is indistinguishably nothing from it. You see my hand? Where's my hand appearing?
In my awareness.
Yes. My hand is in your awareness. When you look at the Andromeda Galaxy in the night sky, where's the Andromeda Galaxy appearing? It's in your awareness. The entire universe appears in your awareness. So what relationship can your awareness have to anything other than identity? Your awareness is the only thing you can find. Because if you're finding anything, by definition, you're finding it in, and you're finding nothing but your own awareness, which miraculously is appearing as however you're experiencing it, right?
So you're saying this to me because I'm not sure why. I'm not sure what.
Well, you're talking about awareness that can have movement or development or be oriented different ways. That kind of an awareness is just different qualities of mental experience,
Right.
which are not awareness itself, but objects that are appearing within awareness. For example, you can say, "Oh, I'm dizzy," and yet you know that you're dizzy with absolute clarity. So the actual awareness is the absolute clarity that's experiencing an unclear state. If you're having an unclear state, you experience that state with absolute clarity. You know, if you can be stone drunk, and yet you know you're stone drunk with absolute clarity, because the awareness doesn't get drunk. Drunkenness is a phenomenon that shows up in awareness. And likewise, concentration shows up in awareness. Spaciness shows up in awareness. You know, delirium shows up in awareness. Unconsciousness shows up in awareness. So all of these various states, which can change and can be developed and can have mobility, all appear within this awareness, which is the ground state, which has absolutely no development, absolutely no change, and absolutely no mobility. It's the space that everything happens in. And you could say it's mental, but that's meaningless, because compared to what? Since everything appears in it, it's just as physical as mental. I mean, all material objects, it's what they're appearing in. It's what our so-called physical space is appearing in, as well as it's what our thoughts are appearing in, it's what your subjective states are appearing in. Everything is appearing in this field of awareness, right?
I think that the unchanging quality is what I had seemed doubtful, or was vague or something.
Right. Well, phenomena change continuously, and they have their very nature is change. You can't keep them from changing. Any phenomena whatsoever comes and goes and changes. But awareness itself is that which does not change. And yet, when you look for awareness, you don't find anything. So it's not like it's a thing that's not changing. You can't find awareness. Awareness is wholly transcendental. And yet it's wholly obvious, too. But there's nothing there. But there's nothing there but it.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship of that awareness, that bare awareness, and identity?
Well, identity occurs within the context of awareness. And identity is a process of imaginative identification. It's a frame of reference. It's like the rules of a game. You know, I define, okay, this is a game piece, and this is the game board, and I am the game piece. I'm running the game piece, and I'm running it on the game board. You know, say, in a typical materialistic human kind of a thinking. And so I'm identifying with this, and not identifying with that. But all of that is a basically imaginary construct, exists in fantasy only, within the context of awareness, because all phenomena exist within awareness. You can have a state of unidentification in awareness. For example, when you're in deep sleep, you don't know who you are, you don't know what you are, and yet that state of deep sleep exists within awareness. You can have, hallucinatory states or psychotic states or various other states or, spiritual states where you're essentially unidentified or identified in strange ways. You can have a dream where you're identifying yourself as a bird, say, perhaps. And yet all of these conditions, all of these frames of reference, these imaginative frames of reference, exist within awareness. Awareness is also inherently intelligence. Intelligence is one of the inherent phenomena that exists in awareness. So it's able to churn out these interpretations, churn out this fantasizing, churn out this, this ability to designate apparent objects within the context of the field of experience and so on.
So in that sense, there is no ultimate identity behind just existence of pure awareness.
Yeah. If there is an actual identity, it's going to be that. If there's an actual identity, the identity has to be something that actually exists. And what actually exists is this being of, we can call it awareness, and these astounding energy phenomena that it appears as. So if that's all that is, if that's all that exists, and if you are anything, then obviously you must be that, because there's nothing else for you to be. I mean, it's by default. Or you could say there's no identity and it's just that, but that's just playing with semantics. So ultimately, identity becomes a moot point. But when you see what it actually is, then that's what is. And worrying about whether you're it or not is an absurdity. And it becomes especially an absurdity worrying about whether you're some small part of it and not some other small part of it. Oh. Thank you.
Can we get back to the tree thing for a second? Say if the tree is sitting in the, say it's sitting in a floodplain and all of a sudden there's a flood and the water's up to about 3 feet on the tree.
Okay.
And we assume that the tree is aware of the flood, but we really don't know if it is or not, do we?
Of course. We don't know if a tree's even there. You might be dreaming. I might be dreaming. You all might not be here. How can I know if you're aware? You might be here, and you might be aware, but how can I know?
So we just can't assume that the tree is aware of it.
Well, you can assume anything you want, but if you're wise, you'll be aware that it's an assumption. And if you take assumptions as fact, that's one definition of a crazy person. If I assume I'm Napoleon, fine, that's an assumption. But if I believe that assumption, then I may as well be locked up.
Okay.
And likewise, if I believe I'm Peter Brown, that's an assumption. And if I actually believe that, I'm crazy. I don't know what I am. This is mystery. And clearly I must be that. And if I define myself any further, I'm having to manufacture the definitions to do so.
Right. Okay. Could you just say about, the people in this room right now, right here, right this second? I mean, what if there was like 2 fewer people here? Could that be possible than there is now?
What do you mean by possible? I don't understand what you mean.
Well, okay, how about just the people in this room then? Can we just take that back a little bit? The people that showed up in this room.
What about it? What people? I see light, I hear sound.
Okay, you're saying they're not necessary. That's just symbol that I'm placing on it.
Exactly. It's an assumption. It's an interpretation, and it may or may not be true. It may or may not be an interesting interpretation, but you can't know for certain that it's true. So hold it as a hypothesis. We can assume that there are actually other people in this room. First of all, assume that I exist and I'm in this room. Second of all, assume that there's other people in the room, and then we can talk on the basis of that assumption. But if we do that, we're acknowledging that it's an assumption. If we just, oh no, what do you mean? There's people in the room. Are you an idiot? Are you nuts? There's people in this room. Look around you. At that point, you're not getting to the radical basics of what actually is. There is experience. Okay, that's the fact. And then if you start analyzing that experience, what's that experience consist of? Well, we can hypothesize it consists of some experiencing agent called consciousness or awareness, and some sort of energy that's showing up as experience, which may be different than the experiencing agent, or may be the same. We can't know. Right? Like a dream, you dream at night, and you might assume the dream is different than the dreamer, but when you wake up in the morning, you know, oh, that dream was nothing other than the dreamer. What else where could it have come from? What could it have been made of? So, be very careful about jumping to conclusions and believing in assumptions you make. I mean, they're possible. I'm not saying that any interpretation is wrong, but you can't know it's right. So get to what you can know is right. What can you know for sure? You can know that your being is, right? And then you can say that being maybe includes consciousness, or it includes energy. And then you can try and look and see what that is. Look at it in those terms and see if that's meaningful, see if that's productive, see if that's valuable. See what that implies. And it might have a whole different set of implications than the traditional materialist hypothesis implies. Yeah.
I'm trying to understand the difference between awareness and seeing and noticing.
Well, in our made-up jargon, awareness is the basis of experience, and noticing is noticing that fact. So noticing is not being confused, and awareness is what there is. So noticing is an activity or a condition that exists within awareness. Awareness is like the bedrock. Awareness is like the 0 point. Awareness is identical with being. This present moment exists, this present moment is, that means it's the same thing as saying awareness is. And then you can, within that given, you can either notice that that's a fact or not notice that it's a fact, and get caught up in all sorts of interpretations. So noticing is steering away from interpretations and trying to, self-reflexively notice the radical fact, the core fact of the presence of energy and consciousness as experience.
So if we are aware of everything that's happening around us and we feel it and we see it, we can touch it, then I mean, as I understand it, the next process is, well,
be careful. We have a lot of ways we use the word aware, and it's slippery. I mean, all language is equally slippery, but you know, you say, if I'm aware of what's around me, you know, that's a kind of an awareness of conscious attention, okay? But the fundamental awareness is the basic condition of experience. In other words, if there's experience, there's awareness, because there has to be awareness to be experiencing experience, okay? Now, the experience may be of a condition of oblivion or blurriness or spacing out, where within the context of this experience that is, of course, based in awareness, there's a lack of definition. And so you can say, well, gee, I wasn't aware of what was going on around me. But that's a different use of the word awareness. That's a conscious focusing or identification within the context of the inherent awareness, which is just the fact that experience is happening at all. Okay? So that awareness is not personal. It's not something you're doing or not doing. It's just the very being of the present moment. The being of the present moment is the being of experience. You know, never forget, the only thing that is here is experience. And all objects and all supposed circumstances are supposed to exist within this experience. Right? So experience is what there is. Experience occurs within awareness. We'll call that awareness with a capital A. And then we can have all kinds of little awarenesses that are, gee, I wasn't aware, and yet you existed, but you were unaware within that state of existing. So the capital awareness was happening, but you were in a state of not noticing within that actual awareness. Do you follow that?
I'll have to listen to it again. But it seems to me, well, you're talking about noticing in awareness. And the way that I'm trying, I can't seem to grasp awareness, but I understand that maybe in awareness we can go beyond awareness and then we notice, and then maybe we're not aware of the experience anymore, that we're, like what you were saying, you see light and you hear audio.
Yeah.
But you're not actually, are you aware of experience?
Well, experience is just a word for seeing light and hearing sound.
So
If there's no experience, there'd be nothing. There'd be no being. I mean, how do you know that the present moment exists?
because I'm aware of it.
Because you're experiencing it. Okay? What is experiencing is the awareness. Right? Now, within that awareness, within this experience, you can either notice what the experience is nakedly, or you can become confused by all sorts of interpretations and ideas and theories, hypotheses about what it is, which exist in your imagination. And if you would jump to the conclusion that these hypotheses are true and are fact, then you're lost in confusion. You're believing your own story, and you have in actual fact, you have no basis for believing your story, because the only thing we can actually find is this experience, and this experience is extremely vague. This experience is extremely indefinable. So if you're finding definitions, you're supplying them. You see what I mean? Do you follow that? And so noticing is nothing other than noticing that that's the case. Noticing that, wow, this experience is what it is, and it's really interesting, and I had no idea what it was, because I thought it was people and houses and life and politics and food and life and death and money, and it turns out to be just this weird thing called experience, you know? And what is it? What's it made of? How's it happening? That's the interesting questions, you know? And you can ask those questions when you see it directly. When you start looking at experience and look away from all these stories and ideas and interpretations about what that experience is, that we usually take unquestioned. Do you follow that?
So then you're experiencing the raw experience.
Yes.
Okay.
And noticing is nothing other than experiencing the raw experience in this particular jargon. Because when you're telling the experience what it is, you're satisfied with what you're saying. If I'm saying this is a room and you're people and we're having a conversation, what's the question? It's like, okay, cool. Now what do we do? You know? But if I don't know what this is, if I don't know what you are, if I don't know what's happening, all of a sudden there's a big question mark there. It's like, what is this? It's an invitation to investigate. It's an invitation to explore. It's an invitation to look further. Experience turns out to be very open and mysterious and pregnant and unknown. Whereas if I think I know what it is, all of a sudden it's closed and finite and limited and, oh, you're just people, this is just a room, you know? How boring. Let's go do something else. Do you follow that?
I do.
Where do thoughts come into all that?
Where, indeed?
Yeah.
Where do you think? Where do you think?
They seem to appear in experience or awareness,
Yeah.
kind of like magically or something.
Yeah. And let me ask you a parallel question. How does light come into all this? You can say exactly the same thing about it. It
Yeah.
seems to appear magically. There's light and vision. How does sound come into it? You know, how does sensation come into it? How do all of these different phenomena come into it? Well, they appear very mysteriously, don't they? And they disappear equally mysteriously, instantaneously. What we call the flow of time is this constant disappearance of what was here and a constant reappearance of something new that instantly disappears. You know, isn't that strange?
Mm-hmm. I guess I asked about thoughts because they seem to be more random, or they have some random quality that, like, when the light's shining, it doesn't fluctuate very rapidly in the way thoughts do. It might be if you could see it in a different way, but mostly it doesn't. But thoughts seem to just are like fluctuating and that changing and all that more mysteriously, I guess.
I would suggest if you notice more carefully, you'll see that every field of your experience is fluctuating instantaneously. In other words, the pattern of light that you're actually seeing is completely new every instant. If you're thinking of it as the same, you're imposing that same. It's like I'm looking at the wall now. Well, I'm looking at the same wall, so it's the same. Wrong. I'm seeing different patterns of light. I'm seeing different, fluctuations. I'm noticing different aspects of the contrast. I mean, the entire thing is just constantly does not stop, right? And we can notice that it doesn't stop. The field of thought is obviously that way, but if you look, the other fields of your senses are that way. I mean, look at sound. Sounds don't stick around. Sound is just like this, and when you get a pulse of sound, and it's gone, and it's replaced by the next one. And it may be a sine wave, so you say, "Oh, it's coming back." It's not coming back. A new one's coming back. And it's the same with light. I mean, if you were a physicist, you could get some kind of equipment which could stand between your eyes and the field of vision that you're seeing, and count the photons, and and you're seeing a different photon every time. It's not the same photon coming through. So it's a different experience, isn't it? But it's just the same. It's not changing. It is changing. We're just not noticing. We are imposing a map, a model of changelessness, of stability on something that is just fluctuating wildly.
I don't even know what a photon looks like.
Well, you do. You're looking at them right now.
Yeah. What do they look like?
Yes.
Well, the other thing about thoughts that I find perplexing is that some of them seem to be mine, and some of them seem to be floating in the ether or whatever.
What does mind mean?
I mean, they seem to be generated by something that I would call myself, from like over here, in contrast to some other thoughts that seem to be more general and part of the.
Do thoughts all occur in the same place, so to speak, if we can talk about them as occurring in a place?
I don't think so.
Thoughts occur in different places?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, maybe, I mean, ultimately they may seem to be in my awareness, but
Right.
they seem to originate in different places, perhaps.
Uh-huh. Well, I don't know, you can explore that. Play with it.
I guess I can wonder how I can perceive thoughts that are originating from elsewhere, and a distinction between those and the ones that seem to be originating more locally or something like that.
If you're experiencing it, it's occurring in your awareness, right?
Yeah.
So how can you know where it's originating? I mean, when it originates in your awareness. When you walk in the room and see me sitting here, all of a sudden I'm originating in your awareness,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you were outside not seeing me, I was not in your awareness. I hadn't originated. So here I am. Did you put me here, or did I put me here, or did I just pop up mysteriously?
The latter.
Yeah. And so can we say the same thing about thoughts?
About what thoughts? Yeah.
Thoughts. I mean, they aren't there, and then all of a sudden they're there,
Right.
and then there comes a time when they're not there. And what actually was happening? You know, how did it happen? You know, and to split hairs and say, "Oh, that's my thought." No, that's not my thought. This one's mine. This one's half mine and half mine. You know, it's like, on what basis can you do that with any authority, with any accuracy, you know, with any objectivity? I mean, all you can really know is that this weird energy is showing up in what you call your mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, right?
Right. From wherever.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the notion of from. Why does it have to come from somewhere? Maybe it didn't. Maybe it just instantaneously creates and destroys right there, right then and there. Yeah.
The desire to understand and know, isn't that a distraction or just another? I mean, what you're saying is, there's always just this,
Yes.
and this is real,
Yes.
and this is alive, not
Yes.
static,
Yes.
and kind of be intimate with this.
Yes.
And yet, as soon as we begin to interpret this, describe this,
Mm-hmm.
although you're describing, well, but the way that we begin to separate from the reality of this.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't know if that has any value there.
And yet when we can notice this kind of imaginative separation taking place, we're learning something about the inherent functioning of this energy, because that very separation is constituted by this energy that's here, right? And even the quest to want to understand it, or to seek it, or to know it in some way, it's that same force, it's that same energy, it's constituted of the same thing. So the entire thing is itself fair game for investigation, right? So paradoxically, the urge to investigate can be investigated and find that there's nothing there other than this, which is paradoxically the resolution of the investigation.
Well, sometimes it thinks like, what we've got here is glucose,
The what?
What we've got here sometimes is like gloop pus.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't really hear that word.
Like the Dalai Lama's lineage, which is a
Oh, yes.
intellectual approach.
Yes.
Where other lineages might be just in Buddhism, sit down and shut up.
Yeah.
And but I get this sometimes,
As opposed to that.
sometimes this is obviously seems to lack some kind of substance or reality, or obviously this is, well, we'd say this has no content, but the appearance of this is colored by fatigue, anger, anything, right?
But fatigue and anger and all of those qualities are this. That's just interpretations of this, right? What else could they consist of?
Well, it appears, okay.
If anger isn't anger, what is it? You can say, boy, I'm really angry. And then you could say, wait a minute, suppose I don't know what this is. What's happening? What is this experience that's happening here?
I guess I'm thinking anger would be some rejection of this, or some kind of separation of intimacy with this.
It might be interpreted that way, but if anger is existing, then that means it is one with this. Or how could it exist? What could it be made of? How could it be appearing? I mean, so the substance that the so-called anger consists of, is literally made of, has to be this. Because what else would it? How else could it be appearing?
Yeah, so I'm saying like only emptiness is real, and you're saying both form and emptiness are equally as real.
Well, there's no form in emptiness. Form and emptiness. Form is a word for emptiness, and emptiness is a word for form. Those are both oversimplifications of what there actually is, which partakes of both qualities. It's quite easy to look and see that there's absolutely nothing here. It's also quite easy to look and see that there's all of this incredible detail here, and that you don't have to collapse it. It's not an either or. One side doesn't have to win. It's not that it has to be this or it has to be that. The fact that it doesn't make sense, and it's a paradox, and it's completely mystifying, so what? Why not that's just how it is, and okay, so form is a void. Interesting.
So the confusion that I find myself in, that's as much this as a sense of clarity.
Yes. It's exactly the same. Because you're interpreting, you're playing a game with yourself of here's clarity and here's confusion, and any confusion that can appear is going to just be this. Any clarity that's going to appear is going to just be this. So why bother to distinguish?
Why bother having a desire to be less confused?
No, not why bother having a desire. The desire, because the desire is itself a radiant apparition, expression of the void form.
So everything, no matter what, is this.
Yes. 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 Stop there.
Yeah, because I don't know what to make of it.
Yeah. And when you want to make something of it, that's when you can get confused. Because why make anything of it? Making anything of it is samsara. That's the essence of samsara. It's like, what am I going to make of this? Bang! You jumped into confusion. You jumped into, what is this? Where am I? All of a sudden you're in frames of references. Where am I? How do I define this? How do I understand this? How do I cope with this? What do I do with it?
So when conditioning is arising, which is also this,
yes.
However that conditioning appears to provoke suffering, or the suffering itself, same thing, just another form of, leave everything alone, basically.
Leave everything alone, and stop naming it. Stop believing the names. Instead of saying it's suffering, just say it's weird energy. Instead of saying it's clarity, say, I don't know, it's a weird energy. Instead of saying it's seeking, say, I don't know, it's a weird energy. Instead of saying it's resting in the incomparable perfection of pure being, say, I don't know, Weird energy. Why bother to play this gamesmanship of playing this off against that when they have to be the same thing? What else could they be made of? Where did they come from? What's energizing them? What machinery is making it happen? You know, whatever. To the extent that there's machinery, there's only one machine, and it's doing this, right? Say this is a name for the hypothetical machinery whose functioning results in this.
Yeah.
And it always is what it is, of course, and it always looks different, obviously. You know, we never experience the same energies in two consecutive instances. You know, for the entire history of your knowledge, right? So it always is the same. It always is in its identity is what it is, and it always looks different. And that's what there is. And sometimes it looks like radiant clarity, and sometimes it looks like crushing depression, and sometimes it looks like wars, and sometimes it looks like golden ages. You know, and sometimes it looks like drug addicts, and sometimes it looks like functionality. You know, within one life, let alone within everyone's life, right? And yet, if you look what it is, it's always this incredible paradox of void form, this mystery, and it's right here. It can't be more intimate, and you can't get anywhere else. You're not going to find anything else, because anything you find is going to be this. You know, you go to the Himalayas and you study with Rinpoches and you meditate in caves and you do 5-year retreats 10 consecutively, you know, and you're an old man and you're sitting there and all of a sudden you get incomparable enlightenment. What's it going to be? It's going to be this. So save yourself the trouble. Or not. It doesn't care. because nothing's really, it doesn't mean anything anyway. It's like the caption, you know. Imagine you're writing someone's curriculum vitae in great detail, and you write a book about them, right? And then you step back a couple of parsecs and take a picture of the Milky Way galaxy. You say, okay, here's the caption. Okay. Then you write a completely different caption, and you step out back a couple of parsecs and you take the same picture of the Milky Way galaxy. The actual fact is the same. You're just describing it in different ways. You're saying, oh, I lived a life of heroic struggling and I finally realized incomparable enlightenment. Great. Or, you know, I was a bum and I slept around and I coped as best I could and most of the time I fucked up but I kind of got by. Great. But they're captions on the same picture. They're captions on this. So why bother to get upset about captions? Because they're not true. They're not what's really happening. Do you see that?
I mean, part of me sees it.
Okay, that's good.
You know, like, for example, like today at work, I was talking to this coworker, and I noticed how she's like buying her 7th house, scooping up these, you know, foreclosures.
Yeah. Very clever.
And I'm basically in the process of like losing everything that I have, and it's hard for me to see that we're doing this. I mean, it is. I mean, I see it's both this, but it's hard for me to, you know, not have like salt rubbed in the wound and feel hurt.
Yeah, but that hardness and that hurt and that salt rubbed in the wound is this too.
Yeah.
And as soon as it is this, it is the hardness and the salt in the wound, but it's so much more. It's all of a sudden this open field of infinity. And you can go into that, you know. The suffering when it's just suffering, and it sucks. But suffering when it's this, it's still suffering, but it's this bottomless infinity of this. It's just this incredible open field of value, of meaningfulness, of true being. And also all of a sudden suffering isn't really suffering anymore because it's so much more. And joy isn't really joy anymore because it's so much more. And it all is inherently this clarity. It all is inherently this pure being.
I guess, well, that's what I'm hopeful of, having a better recognition of.
Yeah. Well, play with it. I mean, just notice that anything is actually more than you're thinking of it as being. Even just a subjective state, like I'm in a mood, I'm in a funky mood, I'm depressed, I'm whatever. It's like, okay, you're labeling an energy state and experience as being this. Okay, fine. So you don't need to deny it. Fine. Leave that label, set it aside. Now look and see what it actually consists of. And you're going to see a field of energies that are going to be present in your consciousness, the actual qualities. And these qualities are going to be myriad, they're going to be complex, they're going to be subtle. They're not going to be as simplistic as the caption implies. There's going to be all sorts of flavors there. It's like you taste it, you taste the stew and you go, ew, beef stew, I don't like beef stew. But if you just taste it and let the flavors sit in your mouth, it's like, wow, I mean, it's beef stew, but Jesus, it's just a universe of flavors, and this and that, and sweet and sour, and complex and spicy, and I mean, it's like looking at, it's like looking at a galaxy or something. It's like looking at under a microscope in a crystal or something. It's just incredible detail and structure and meaningfulness there. And it's not like the beef stew isn't there, that it is beef stew, but it's so much more than just some simplistic idea of beef stew. It's this symphony of values. And even our emotional states are this symphony of values. And the symphony is literally unbounded in its complexity. It's unbounded in its subtlety. It's unbounded in its sort of plethora of meaningfulness. And we can experience that just by looking for it. It's not that it's hard to find, it's that we don't bother to look because we just say, oh, I'm depressed, and then we stop. It's depression, we push away, and we don't notice this. I mean, depression is this incredible ocean, But we can always notice it because it's truth. It is. Any experience is infinitely subtle and infinitely complex and infinitely profound. And if we settle for a simplistic, knee-jerk definition of what it is and then stop looking, we're the losers. Because it's plain to see that things are more complex than we're labeling them as. It's like political spin doctrine, One politician says, oh, this idea is a terrible idea. Well, yeah, maybe it is, but but like any idea, it's got all sorts of subtleties and complexities and pluses and minuses, and if you really look at the actual data, it's this complex, subtle, real-world situation as opposed to a knee-jerk, spin doctor caption punchline of, oh, this is a bad idea, or whatever, So this oversimplifying is how we limit ourselves, how we build ourselves into samsara, how we build ourselves into pain, into suffering, by thinking we think we're in a situation and we have a reaction to that situation. The actual situation is infinitely more complex, so if we notice that, then we'll see we're not really in the situation we thought we were. We just weren't looking close enough. Yeah.
In conversation with what you're saying, my experience and my own way of operating, which tends to be very reactive, and I do push things away and I jump to conclusions very quickly. I think from my observation of doing that, it comes from, I think, an oversensitivity to pain and feeling overwhelmed with experience. I feel like I'm walking around, I think, in a state of overwhelm.
Right.
And I can manage socially, and I conventionally make it so I don't get put away. And I function and I serve and all this, but there is an overwhelm of such, now it sounds like I'm making up a story, and maybe I am, but this is my story about myself and my brother, who just went into the mental hospital here today for bipolar. He came out Saturday and he had to go back in again today. And that brings up suffering in me, or pain, because I feel helpless. I can't. I'm talking on a conventional level, real, like whether this is real or not, it seems real in our practical everyday lives. And my tendency is to defend and do exactly what you're saying leads to suffering, but I think it's because the system, we won't say me, just the nervous system of the system, is so habituated toward high tension or stress, you know, suffering or pain, and I don't want more. I can't bear to make sense out of why this is happening to John yet again. So I get angry, or I get reactive with the system, or with Johnny, or myself, or the way our family is handling it, or whatever. Is any of this making sense where you can enter into it? Or I'm asking how you see these things, or how you deal with it on a conventional human level, not just. It sounds like a lot of philosophy, and I'm wondering how you, on a practical level, you negotiate the everyday happenings that happen that cause suffering. Is that possible, or am I saying too much?
When you say you get overwhelmed, what does that mean? So specifically.
I guess part of it is I feel like, in the case of Johnny, I would like to have some agency or effect in helping him to have a safe, sane, happy life. And
are you doing what you can in that regard?
I'm doing what I can, but I feel overwhelmed in the sense that I feel helpless.
Okay.
With the actual facts, I don't know.
Maybe you are helpless. If you're doing what you can.
I am.
It's like wanting peace in the Middle East.
Yeah, I guess it's part I can't
like,
accept that. Yeah, it's hard to accept and let go that I can't do anything. And I say that out loud, and I say it to him even. But it's
I mean,
still,
if you're doing what you can,
I still feel a bit overwhelmed or taxed by it.
And I expect he's doing what he can too.
He is.
You know.
He's buying another car, and he's drinking, and he's doing what he can.
Yeah, but exactly. But he has this functionality that works the way that it does, which gets him in this kind of situation. And that's how it is. That's reality. That's
he's a tender-hearted being, yet he suffers, and it hurts.
Yeah.
And one moment he's screaming and yelling and fighting, and the next minute he's crying and really suffering. And it's not just a game. I don't think it's just making the whole thing up.
No, of course not.
And yet maybe he is. I mean, I don't know. All I know is as a human being who I care about, and at the same time want to distance from, and yet it's all, you know what I mean?
Right.
It's just confusing.
Well, you care about him. You do what you can to help him, to whatever extent you can be a benevolent influence, I'm sure. And it hurts you to see him suffering, right? Are you okay with that? I mean, those three statements?
I guess that's what I'm trying to say. I guess I try to be okay with it, but I'm not so sure I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Obviously, I wouldn't be having a conversation.
You wish things were different.
I wish things were different.
Okay.
There's a wish for things to be different.
Okay.
Still, I can't just totally, I'm fine with it. And that's
let me ask
about
you,
a lot of things.
Let me ask you
Not just
this.
him.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. Let me ask you this. Can you be okay with the fact that you wish things were different? In other words, you're an altruistic person, you care profoundly, so you wish things were different. Do you feel good about that? Do you feel good about the fact that you're...
No, that's the catch.
So
if I could get behind if I could get myself off the hook and feel wishing things were different were good enough, I'd be fine. I don't believe that wishing things would be different.
But you're already doing what you can.
Yeah, I guess that's it. Yeah.
If you're doing what you can, then how can anything else? What does
I guess I'm holding myself accountable at some level that I should be able to make something happen differently. Say something or be something or keep my mouth shut or say something. There's always something that I could do to affect and make it better, and I can't. I really can't.
If you're doing what you can, I mean, you're punishing yourself for not being Superman.
Yeah.
You're punishing yourself for not being, God and sitting there fixing everything.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds to me like you have a confusion about what you are and who you are.
I don't know. I guess I have a grief, and I don't know if the grief is. I don't know. I just feel sad that people
suffer like that.
Mm-hmm.
That people, like my brother Jimmy, threatened to kill me if I took this brother to Ireland a few weeks ago, because he said if you take him to Ireland, he'll get a manic attack, and I'll hold you responsible. I'll come out with a gun and kill you.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a social worker. He's a social worker. He's the sane one about family. And I feel sad about him because I feel, my God, he's really having problems, or he wouldn't talk or act that way, you know.
Yeah.
And I can't do anything about that. I feel I need to remove myself from him.
Right.
Instead of getting closer and finding reconciliation,
Right.
I feel this is the way it is. I need to let it be, and it's suffering. It doesn't feel good to me.
Right.
I'd like to say I don't suffer, but I feel grief. Maybe that's just the way it is.
Well,
Just that I feel grief.
Clearly, you know, and I mean, and it's true that you wish things were different, and it causes you pain that you can't, you know, do more than you are able to do.
I don't know what else to say.
And, I mean, there's the reality of what actually is, and then there's our reaction to that if we want it to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And if we want it to be different, we're screwed, because obviously it's not different, because it is the way it is.
But then where is the window of dynamically interplaying with what is and having an effect on the...
Well, you're doing that, aren't you? You're doing what you can
What
for
I
your brother.
can.
Yeah, well, that's the window. The window is open and you're reaching through it.
Yeah. But it's usually coming from, I don't like this, let's do it better. I mean, or I wouldn't have any movement.
Well, that's okay.
Sitting quietly.
But that's who you are,
Yeah.
right? That's your honest,
Yeah.
that's your value.
My response.
Yeah, that's your best shot. You know, it's like you step up to the plate and you give it you give it your best shot and you swing. You know, maybe you connect, maybe you strike out, maybe you hit a home run, right? And there's no point punishing yourself for not being Babe Ruth. Maybe you are Babe Ruth, but maybe you're not. And if you're not, well, why beat yourself up about it?
See, it's not a conscious punishment. It's not like I'm consciously beating myself up. I just feel the effects.
Yeah, of course.
I feel like, I'm feeling bummed out. I'm feeling
Well, you know,
worried.
yeah. I would suggest you could try and notice the mechanism as best you can objectively. Try and notice that you are doing.
Yeah.
You're giving it the best shot to whatever degree you have to bring.
Yeah.
And you may not be Superman. You know, you may have what you have to bring, and you bring it, and if that isn't enough, well, that's unfortunate. But you don't have more.
Right.
You know, it's like if they need $1 million and you have $100,000, and you say, well, I'm going to give you the 100,000, but that's the best I can do. It's like, well, that's too bad. It's just not enough.
Somehow it feels like it's not good enough to say that's not enough. You're supposed to come up with more, you know. It's some kind of a core belief that there should be something else that can be done. And that I need to let that go. Yeah, just let it go.
Try and look at it.
Feels like an abandonment though, you know, and it's just,
If you're giving it your best shot, look at that abandonment. See how accurate that assessment of abandonment actually is. If you're really doing what you can, you know, it's accepting the fact that you're a limited being and situations are limited and out of our control, right?
Yeah.
A minute ago, you used the example or the metaphor of at the plate.
Sure.
Batting at the plate. And somehow, and I don't know if it's a guy thing or an American culture thing or human, but there's always the question about batting practice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like, oh, well, I'd have a whole lot better chance, on my, hitting the ball now if I had taken more, done something or do something or, next week do something. And I'm not sure how much of that's justified, but I look at inside myself, I don't see it being avoidable. To say, oh, here I am, and I'm born in these circumstances and this and that. But did I do all that I could? Am I doing all that I can? Well, actually, no. I don't think I am. What does that mean? Well, I'm not sure, but I'm just saying it's like a permanent question. And I mean, it's like a permanent dissatisfaction.
But all of this dissatisfaction exists fundamentally in your imagination, right? I mean, you're hypothesizing, you're building a picture, an imaginary picture of how you could or should be, and you're having a picture of how you are, and you're seeing a discrepancy, and you're saying, well, this ought to be more like this. So the whole thing's a fantasy.
Right.
It exists in the realm of fantasy, and what happens the way it does because it's the way it is. In other words, you actually do what you do because you're actually who you are, including having the fantasies about thinking you ought to be different or you might be able to be different, right?
Yeah.
Like you take someone who was abused as a child, and as a result they have some dysfunctionality or acting out, or they're defeatist, or they don't function very well, and they sit there, build this picture, I should be functioning better, I should be a healthy person. It's like, well, you would be a healthy person if you hadn't come from this screwed up situation. But you did. You did come from a screwed up situation, so of course you're damaged. It's like saying, I wouldn't have this scar on my thumb if I hadn't cut myself with a knife when I was 7. But I did, and there's the scar. It shouldn't be there. Yeah, well, how shouldn't it be there? Only in my imagination. It is there because I did cut my thumb.
I mean, if I take a look at myself, and I mean, then I say, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, it certainly feels like. I mean, coming to these evenings, these Wednesday evenings, is perfect for me. Perfect example, because I mostly don't do the thing that you say.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I get a teensy weensy. I mean, I get a teensy weensy little hint, like, oh yeah, this is fantastic stuff. It's a shame I don't get it, And I think, well, so maybe but so what do I think? And then think, well, I'll come back, or I'll stick around, or seem like a nice bunch of people, really. And it's like, but so that's all having to do with me. But then I just take a look at, I take a look at, the world, just community, and I think, is everybody doing all that they can? My Puritan conclusion is no, they're not. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Sure.
And I'm not sure, and maybe it's not going to change a thing, one way or the other. I mean, it's a wonderful question. But I do believe that there is a certain, in 12-step work, they say blameless, hold myself blameless, hold everything out there blameless, and hold it accountable. And blameless and accountable. I mean, if I want my fucking life to get better, I have to make an effort.
Sure. And suppose you make an effort and it fails. You want your life to get better. Everyone on the street wants their life to get better. Mm-hmm. So they go out there and they give it their best shot, and suppose they fall down on their face. Then what? Whose fault is it?
100 times a day, I mean, today, Frey and I'm working hard, and she says, you're no fun to work with. I just kind of have to sit with that, And this is supposed to be fun, and I'm so it's like continual failure.
Well,
but I don't know. I mean, there's no real conclusion.
Success and failure is fundamentally.
I think there's somehow that there's like a balance or a certain, it's like I don't know, like an edge of effort. I mean, it comes right. All it always comes around to free will, choice, improvability, responsibility, that, and and I think people are all along kind of a spectrum of that, and everybody's where they are, and most people, want things to somehow get better, and they're, I guess for the most part, doing the best they can. I don't know.
Well, if people are doing the best they can, then why punish them for not doing better?
Well,
I mean, it'd be nice if they would.
I don't believe people are doing the best they can.
Well, you just said it.
No,
I didn't make you
I
say
said
it.
for the most part.
Oh, for the most part.
For the most part. It's a tricky question, but
No, it isn't. It's because I don't know anyone who does anything who says, I'm going to fuck this up. Everybody goes into everything, doing whoever they are, doing exactly what they know.
And they do the best they can.
And if it's shooting somebody on the street, that's the best they know.
I hear that, and yet in my life, and I'm in the middle of a messy situation right now, where this guy, broke some agreements, and then I say, what I say is, I've got, for my life to get better, I get as far away from him as I can. So the only response that I can make is not to try to change him, it's to create a bigger separation, and to take a look at my tendency to get involved with him in the first place. But there's always, that's very, very real. Very, very real.
And if you really want to look at that other person you're pushing away, there's really some part of you. And if you just have them in front of you, know that everything in your life is your projection. And so that one in front of you is some part of you projecting for you to see a part of yourself.
It's that's kind of the blameless part. It's very complicated for me.
But don't fight
do
reality. Don't fight reality. Reality is what's in front of you. It looks like you think you're a failure. That's your reality. So don't fight it to be other than what it is. It's like if he says, if you cut your finger and you say, but I don't want that scar there, the reality is the scar's there. You don't fight the reality. Your definition of failure is based in your head. It doesn't exist anyplace else.
I guess what I would say is that there's this the whole serenity prayer and a certain quality of acceptance and effort and attention and diligence and what does that mean? And maybe it's only 1/10,000th part that I actually have some choice in. But if I don't act, if I don't take that focus and do that, if I do, then my life over time has and will change dramatically. And if I don't, then I.
And you don't know that for sure. You don't know that. You don't know that if you just sat with what's in front of you, it wouldn't go up on its own. So you thinking you have to do that is also just your thought.
So Peter, there seem to be two separate approaches to life, spiritual life. One is to make things better, and one is to penetrate through, by some means, to the truth. The truth may be being perfectly naked and obvious, but we haven't noticed it.
Yes.
So there's truth on one hand, and there's reaching a place of perfection. Just remember, this was helpful to me a long time ago. I read Carl Jung, and he made a distinction between perfection and wholeness. Perfection is, if thy right eye offends thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee, as St. Paul. If thy right arm offends thee, cut it off and cast it from thee. This is becoming perfect by becoming smaller and smaller and smaller. And then there's the other approach, wholeness. You become perfect in another sense by becoming everything, literally everything, and knowing what that is.
It's the right-hand path versus the left-hand.
All right, I'm beginning to understand the hands, this hands-on approach.
In terms of the path of self-improvement versus the path of finding reality,
Right.
it turns out self-improvement is ultimately impossible without finding reality.
That's what I was actually leading to.
Yeah.
I think because you often don't make that final statement that find out what the truth is, and a lot of the problems will disappear of themselves because a lot of our problems were confusion and assumption and arrogance and all the the whole ball of wax. And if we do approach it from the point of view of truth and realize that truth, there's some therapy in that too, isn't there?
Well, yes and no. Fundamentally, the problem is this: if you want to improve your lot in life, if you're not reality-based, you're just going to be wandering around in circles of delusion. You know, it's like, I want to improve my life, so I'm going to go out there and try and get rich. I'm going to become a movie star. And so I get rich and I become a movie star. Am I then happy? Do I have no problems? No. There's some other problems. Oh, I'm going to solve those problems by, murdering the people I hate. And so I murder the people I hate, and then the police are after me. So there's this never-ending chain of supposition that, oh, this is going to bring me happiness, and I chase it, and I get it, or I don't get it. If I don't get it, I'm not happy. If I get it, it turns out I'm not happy. So there's this chasing mirages. I'm thirsty and in the desert, and it looks like there's a pond up there, so I'm going to run and chase it, and I get there, and there's nothing there. It wasn't what I thought it was. So ultimately, the only effectiveness that can be found, obviously, can only be found in what actually exists. Having a fantasy effectiveness and achieving a fantasy goal and trying to find a fantasy happiness is ultimately not going to satisfy because it's not real. So I'm thrown perforce back on what is real because that's what has effect. That's what has sustenance. That's what has actual value. That's what has actual meaningfulness. So you can't find meaningfulness except in reality. You try and find it in fantasy, and it's going to leave you high and dry.
But in our culture, pardon me, if you can speak for a little bit. In our culture, we have this so deeply embedded in us that we have to be perfect and go to heaven, which would be a perfect, eternally perfect place that'll never change. It'll always be perfect. Harps and golden streets and all of that.
Good luck with
so
that.
embedded in us, if we're looking for that perfection.
Good luck with that. How many people do you know that have found it?
I looked in the mirror one day and realized it wasn't going to happen with me.
But that begs the question of how do you define perfection? How do you define imperfection?
Usually by cutting something off from that's imperfect and getting rid of it.
Yeah, but how do you know it's imperfect?
Right.
Just because you have suppose your measuring gauge of perfection versus imperfection is arbitrary or wrong.
Right.
Then what do you do? Someone tells you, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and you're gullible enough to believe it. How do you know they're right?
Well, yeah, and then you really get neurotic when you cut off the wrong part. And you're really guilty then.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's happened too.
Sure. Of course. All of that. But the bottom line is, reality is the only thing you can find that's going to be real.
What do you mean by reality?
What is?
Just
what is? Your brother is in a mental institution. That is reality. Okay? If you can't find satisfaction with that fact, you're not going to find satisfaction because that fact is the fact. You see what I mean? So you have to find a way to find satisfaction that incorporates that fact. It also incorporates the fact that that's not the be-all and end-all of a situation. He's been out of the hospital, and sometimes he'll probably be out of it again.
See, that's the thing. It's not just that he's in the hospital. He'll be out and in, out and in, out and in, because there's not enough of a support system to help the guy.
And if that's the fact, that's reality.
Yeah.
So if you're going to find happiness, you're going to find it in the context of that fact.
Yeah.
If that fact is going to keep you unhappy, then you're going to be unhappy. And that's the fact.
Yeah, that's why it's up to me to shift.
Yeah.
That's why I'm having the conversation.
Right. So reality is what is.
On that, but without abandoning a willingness to have possibilities beyond what I'm assuming is reality.
Okay. Yeah, but let me go
something else.
Well, this is an important point. Let me go a little farther. Reality is what is, but reality might be vastly more or different than you're thinking it is.
My assumption of what reality
Yeah,
is.
so your interpretation of reality is not reality
That's
and
what-
cannot be reality,
that's what I'm saying.
because reality is always more subtle, more complex, more elusive, more multi-valued, more paradoxical as it actually is than we can think of it.
Right.
So you think about your brother, you're thinking of fantasy, because the actual situation with him is going to be different.
Yeah.
In some maybe subtle ways, maybe extreme ways, but what's actually going on is different.
Yeah.
So actually your reaction and your difficulty with him isn't even with your brother or the reality, it's to your fantasy of it.
Frozen picture, what happened.
Yes,
This
yes,
is
frozen
the way it
picture.
still is, and it's not
Yes,
the same.
and the frozen picture is not reality. So if you can try to, you don't need to fight with the frozen picture, but somehow dodge around it and try to intuitively feel your way into the reality a little better, then you're dealing with something different than the frozen picture and the reaction to that. And then you can try and see what's really there. And then you're engaged more with reality and less with fantasy, less with imagination. To whatever extent you can. Because ultimately, if you're going to find real happiness, it's got to be in the context of real being. You can't find, if you look in fantasy, a fantasy happiness is not going to please, it's not going to ring the bell. You know? I mean, it would be nice if it would, but it doesn't seem to work that way. You know, real satisfaction can only be found in reality. But reality is subtle. Reality is not simplistic. Reality
It's
is
not a
not
bunch of
obvious.
assumptions.
No, it's not. It's what it actually is. And we have to go out and try and meet it where it is and try and find it and try and see into that as best we can. And it'll surprise us. And there'll be things there that will have assets there. We'll have allies there. We'll have hidden nuggets that, wow, I didn't know that was there. I thought the situation was this, but oh, look at this. That's kind of nice. There's some hidden goodnesses in there that I didn't even notice because I was, jumping to conclusions about things.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if you read the paper today, but this guy that came from India and got married and got a good job at a corporation. And anyway, there was a lot of tension going on in the family, so he, at the dinner table, killed his wife and killed his wife's brother and all his kids, and then went in the bathroom and killed himself. So was that God doing all those things?
What else? I mean, just ask if it's God doing it to say, is another way of saying, did that really happen? Was it real?
Right.
Of course it's real. If it happened, it's real.
Yeah.
Or maybe the newspaper was lying and made it all up.
Well, I'm still trying to get a handle on that everything that's going on in the world right now is being orchestrated by God or consciousness. And it just can't quite sink in.
Well, what do you think's doing it?
Well, no, I guess it is, but
I mean, think of it as this way. Think of it as we're all these clouds of atoms that move around. The air is a cloud of atoms, our body's a cloud of atoms, the earth is a cloud of atoms. Why does that cloud of atoms do what it does? Because of the laws of physics, right? So if you get up and pull out an Uzi and waste us all, it's the laws of physics doing it, i.e. God. Right? You had a chemical imbalance, which is physics, or brought about by your history, which is physics, because of the interaction of this cloud of atoms with other clouds of atoms, right? I mean, anything that really happens because reality has made it that way. Reality is that way. And God is just a poetic way of saying that. God is a poetic way of saying reality. God is a poetic way of saying what actually is.
So where does it leave you? It leaves you sort of, if you want to feel well-being or serenity or kind of happy, you need to accept chaos.
Sure.
Just
You need to
chaos.
accept chaos, you need to accept order, you need to accept what is. Because labeling it chaos is oversimplistic. There's an awful lot of order here. I mean, all of our bodies here, for example, are more or less functioning. There's some order there. The roof isn't falling on us right at this moment. There's some order there. Things are, being pretty well behaved. So, sure, it's chaos, but
For a
it's
while.
also,
Behave for a while. But ultimately, there's death, this dysfunction, this disintegration, there's things happening, what looks like in the human mind, unjustly, unfairly, and this huge suffering that you can't
But
really about.
the idea that that's unjust or unfair is complete fantasy,
It's all
complete
human
delusion,
made up.
because everything continually falls apart.
Right.
Right. So our idea that death is some horrible thing to be avoided is an absurdity.
I'm not talking about so much death, it's the suffering that leads to death. It doesn't feel good.
Suffering doesn't lead to death.
I'm talking
Suffering
about
may
pain,
occur along the way.
disease, disintegration, wounds
Yeah.
that don't heal. That, in terms of a human being,
Right.
it doesn't feel good.
Right. Yeah, it hurts.
Nobody
Sucks.
likes that. I don't like it.
Yeah, life sucks.
So that's what I mean. It ends up as life sucks.
Yeah.
You know, you have some good times, but ultimately, you're having a rough trip, usually.
Yeah, but saying it's a rough trip, is that really the end of the story? Sure, there's pain, but what else is there?
Sometimes
Is that all there is?
No, not at all.
Is there pain and pleasure? Is there more profound qualities than that? Does it just get down to pain and pleasure? Is there any kind of wisdom? Is there any kind of satisfaction? Is there any kind of meaning from
For
it?
some people, not everybody.
Sure. Yeah.
I think we have it relatively good, I'm assuming, you know. Relatively, but still it's a pain in the ass.
Sure. If that's how it is, if that's really how it is, then that's really how it is.
Yeah.
And you'd be best to try and see that and accommodate to it.
That would be a good strategy.
Yeah, I would think.
I'm trying to do that. I think it's a pretty good way to live.
My question is that really how it is?
Is it? Good question.
Because before we know what it is or experience what it is, we have our projections. And so almost everything that's being said is a projection.
Mm-hmm.
I've already defined what suffering is, and I've decided that that is a wound. I've already defined, so the question for me would be, what is suffering?
Mm-hmm.
And inquire into that in terms of real experience. And then notice that I'm having a projection, and inquire into that. What is that?
Well,
Before I start to say I know what
But you
something
can
is.
call it a projection. It's very easy to sit in a room like this and call things projections. But if you have an open wound, and you see your mother with an open wound for 3 years, and she's as serene and conscious as I've ever seen a human being, and it is pain. Now you can say there's a difference between pain and suffering, but believe me, it's not a projection. Suffering, that kind of pain, is not a projection.
Right.
It's an experience
You're using the
that
word-
nobody wants.
Right.
I don't care what kind of a
Well,
Buddha
what
they
is
are, they don't
wanting?
want it.
First of all, what does wanting have to do with anything?
It's
And
part of the
number
human
one-
experience. I think people
Yeah.
want.
Yeah,
It's
they,
part
yeah.
of want.
But how much good does that do you?
It doesn't do you any good, but it's part of the mechanism.
Yes, okay.
Wanting is part of living.
Okay, good. But
You gotta live.
but wanting is not effective. So there's wanting fine. Great.
No, it's not effective. I understand that, but I'm just saying
Okay.
it's part of our system.
Right. And so it's there. Wanting's there. Great. But you're using the words pain and suffering as if they're interchangeable, and I question that.
I know you question it. It's that's what we usually do in a circle like this. You should question it, but if you're in the pain, it's very difficult to get beyond that pain. From my experience.
Difficult? Does that mean impossible? Does that mean
No,
pain and
it's not
suffering are the same?
impossible. It's just difficult.
Well, that's interesting right there, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you can have pain without suffering, that's interesting.
Mm.
I could just say one little thing about that. I mean, a year ago, I'm not going to tell my whole story, but a year ago I would come with my pain and suffering, and I would set it front and center into this circle, and Peter would talk to me, and I kept bringing it, and Peter would meet it, and what ended up happening is that it was here, but it wasn't just here, and now it's my life, and it's what I want to say to you is that I was on the floor with my suffering. I couldn't get up off the floor with my suffering. But I knew that the only way that I was going to actually find any clarity, sanity, answer, whatever you want to call it, was to actually meet the reality that was behind my suffering, which was my thinking. And so, and I could not ever claim that, it doesn't ever come up again. But when you say something like, it's hard when you're in it, I've been in it.
I have too.
And what I'm saying to you is that I still need it, and it's my life now. It's not just satsang. So that's
What's it though? What are you talking
meet
about?
the actual suffering, meet the actual thought.
I'm not talking about thought or suffering. I'm talking about sensation, pain,
Oh my.
deep pain.
Yeah.
So you know what it is, but I'm talking about
Well,
sensation.
there's no point talking about pain because it's a given.
Yeah.
It's a constant. You know, when you feel something, you feel something, and the question is your reaction to that. The question is what do you do with that? The question isn't if it happens. We aren't talking about trying to figure out how to eliminate pain. It's like, okay, all of a sudden your nervous systems are no longer going to feel sensation.
Right.
You know, proof, magic, fairy dust. Ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So pain is a given, so why talk about it?
Well, what I mean is, I think when the sensation of pain is happening, for me at least, my experience is, it tends to overwhelm my ability to just notice.
Sure.
It's overwhelming.
It might
The
be,
nervous system is overwhelmed.
Right. But it's not, no, but you're saying that as a blanket statement. You're saying it's not.
Maybe I'm not good at, what we're supposed to be
But
doing.
there's many different kinds of pain. To say pain is overwhelming, well, yeah, maybe if you get your arm mashed on concrete, it might be overwhelming pain. You get a cut, it hurts. Maybe it's not overwhelming. So there's pain and it's not overwhelming.
Right, that's right.
So there's shades of gray here.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the little pain, I'm talking about big pains.
Well, you can practice on the little pain, I would suggest. And maybe get better at it and you'll be able to work your way up the hierarchy.
You know, Michael,
this is a strategy.
If you take the pain and you say it's just the experience or the sensation, no, that's all that consciousness is the experience. So just keep looking at the pain, and that's a definition you have in your mind. It is still just consciousness. Your nervous system is still consciousness.
I don't know what that means, but it's,
When you asked the question, can I just say one thing? You asked the question earlier, what's the juncture between awareness, I think, and reality, or that? And to me, the juncture where you can act, you said, what are my possibilities or my choices, is inquiry. We don't know. So in a sense, at that juncture, to recognize, I don't know.
Yeah, that would
and
be,
then
right.
inquiry there, that's all.
That's true. Yeah, just holding off and inquiring would be the answer. I don't need to be arguing. I'm being argumentative. It's almost like displaying the whole action of what I'm trying to say is the dilemma, but what you're saying makes sense. I think that's...
Well, I have a question for you. In terms of pain and suffering, I have noticed that whenever I get a bad cold or the flu or something, and when I recover from it, I feel some kind of spiritual release. It's as if suffering leads to some kind of uplift when it goes away. So I would ask you the question, how are you managing your suffering? Because suffering is karma. It's just another thing of karma. And you can either manage it badly or well, in my opinion. It sounds like you're wallowing in it. Why don't you use it as a tool?
Who are you talking to? Who are you talking to? Yeah. I'm not... Oh, me? Oh, okay.
You're the one who's been
Oh, I thought you were
creating this whole problem of pain. Pain is just something that you work with.
Michael, let me just say,
Thank you, Jesus.
you know what, in my life, I mean, we're talking about pain and suffering, but what I think it's instructive, perhaps, in my life, see, my life is totally full of suffering, and there's no pain. You know? I mean, it's like, I've got nothing to complain about. But, and I'm just saying, and there's other people that we hear about whose lives are full of pain and there's no suffering. See what I'm saying? And I mean, I just take an honest 1 second look at my life, and then, there's lots of suffering, so I've got to go find something wrong. Or make something wrong, or create some pain, or manifest some kind of problem, or find some good explanation, or you know what I'm saying? But it just shows me that there's that the connection, the correlation, whatever, it's very arbitrary, very arbitrary.
I saw this quote, and I was in a really dark mood, and really, my state of mind was really ugly, and I was feeling really bitter about people that I think had provoked or caused my situation. And then I saw this quote, and it was, "What you see is who you are."
Right.
And it just meant, that ugliness that I was seeing in the other person and their behaviors was my state of mind in that moment. And it just seems applicable so much of what we think about circumstances and other.
And then you can say what we choose to see is what we become. I mean, there's different ways that can be played with, And
well, and that's a whole nother conversation. If you believe that we even have a choice in that way, I mean, sometimes we could appear to have a choice, but that's questionable.
Peter, you said something that I'd like, before we end tonight, sometime I'd like to get you to define a little more. You said about 3 words inside of a sentence, and it wasn't a complete sentence, but I'd like your definition of it a little more expanded, if possible. But as you were saying, you were equating wisdom with dropping assumptions, or lacking, getting rid of assumptions, going beyond assumptions, or something like that. In other words, lack of wisdom and assumptions were put together. Could you define wisdom in that framework, just so I have a sentence in my mind?
Yeah. Wisdom is an assimilative intuition that is inherent, that we all have the ability to have. It's inherent in the nature of our intelligence. We have the ability to think non-linearly and to assimilate vast panoramas of reality in integrative ways that are meaningful. We gain access to that ability to the extent we free ourselves from simplistic conceptual thinking. Did you follow that? Mm-hmm. So if I'm thinking very simplistically, if I'm thinking, like a 5th grader might think of this is this, this is that, and I think I know what's going on, then I'm basically cutting myself off, potentially, from wisdom. Wisdom is not a linear. Wisdom is an intuitional, assimilative kind of an intelligence that we all have access to the extent that we allow ourselves to rest in our actual intelligence and let go of residing in this linear, caption-based, story-based, conceptual intelligence. Did you follow that?
Mm-hmm.
There's been a lot of talk about pain and suffering tonight, and I would like to say one thing about suffering. I would define suffering as being an index of how far removed we are from reality. The more you're suffering, the more you are denying or removing yourself from reality, or, what if, should be, could be, why isn't it? And I think that's the mechanism that leads to and sustains suffering, whereas the greater extent we can actually be assimilated with reality, the reality of our experience, is the extent to which we will be free of suffering. Pain is a different thing, but pain is a sensation that accompanies. Pain is like sight. Pain is an extreme sensation that accompanies certain phenomena, and that's that. Comes with the whole package. It's one of the perks. All this, and you get to feel pain. So
we have a change that.
Well, I think we should.
Still this.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah, of course, everything is reality. I think we should move beyond that topic. We have 10 more minutes. Anything to touch on that hasn't hit the floor?
Can you speak more about the infinite goodness of going beyond pain and suffering that you briefly mentioned?
Well, using the word goodness is kind of iffy.
Okay. Eliminated.
It's a fact that the nature of what actually is this, as we're calling it, is beyond our simplistic descriptions of it. And the greater extent we can notice that is the extent to which we'll be free from being trapped in our simplistic interpretations, which are limiting. which will feel like if you're believing your definitions of yourself as a limited being, you're living a limited life with limited possibilities and limited resources. When you experience the actual open-endedness that circumstances turn out to consist of, all of a sudden you have access to openness, you have access to possibility, you have access to nuance, you have access to complexity and subtlety. Things aren't simply this versus that. All of a sudden there's ambiguity, there's both and, there's you know, it's like do you want chocolate or vanilla versus do you want all the cuisines of the world? You know, you can still have chocolate and vanilla, but you know, you can have curries, you can have, you know, fried plantains, you can have all of this. And we deprive ourselves of this richness to the extent we identify with oversimplified mappings and concepts and frames of reference within the actual field of this incredible richness and incredible complexity that this actually consists of. And, you know, it could be argued that that's a goodness. It's good. But, you know, it's not about good versus bad. It's about full versus, you know, full tank versus running on empty. Maybe. Is that kind of what you were thinking of? Or?
Yeah, I mean, it also seems to be something, well, you just be there. You kind of, and find out the value.
Yeah, well, that's the point. You find out what it is by tapping into what it is. And you can't tap into what it is as long as you're thinking you know what it is. So first thing is to start letting go a little bit and saying, hey, maybe I don't have all the answers. Maybe I don't know what's really going on here. And then all of a sudden you can start to ask questions. You can start to really look and see what there is. And it will show you what it is. And it will inevitably turn out to be more subtle and more complex and more multi-valued than you would have thought before. Because you can't think. Because it is more of all of those qualities than it's possible to think, because we think in these linear, either-or human logical terms, and it far transcends that. It's continuities and ambiguities and subtleties and nuances, you know, inherently. That's what reality consists of. And the more we notice that, the more we have access to that mode of experiencing, that mode of appreciating our own experience, the fullness of it, and the richness of it, and the lusciousness of it, and the unencumberedness of it.
I guess the nature of the inquiry, you know, what is this? I guess that there's also infinite ways of perceiving that.
Yes, very much so. But I would say try and keep it specific. Try not to get too heady with it. You know, go with a sensory impression. You know, go with a flavor. Go with a sound. Go with something very immediate and very actual. And just, you know, look at a flower and like, stop. Don't think it's a flower, and don't think you're standing there seeing it. Just like, wow. You know.
So was there a point where you shifted from a conscious attentiveness where you did what you're suggesting I do, and what they say, like, first you walk on the path and then the path someone, and you no longer walk on the path, but the path walks under you.
Sure, you can say that, yeah. I mean, it's not a point, it's more of a gradation. You know, you gradually notice more and more, and pretty soon you notice there's nothing but noticing. And there's not really there's no point defining anyone in particular as doing the noticing, it's just noticing. And in retrospect, you look back and you see that's all that was ever happening. You just didn't realize it because you were so caught up in your fantasies.
I mean, some of us in this room have been following these paths for a long, long time.
Sure.
And, you know, it's kind of, and it's, you know, to come to some understanding that it's always and always has been just this, you know. It's no, you know, we were told that in some ways, if we were fortunate to have a good guide or something long time ago.
Sure.
Resistance to the well, it just, resistance is this as well, so.
Yeah, it is. It's like telling a kindergartner what it's like to be a 30-year-old adult. You can tell them, but they're not going to get it. Wait 20, 25 years and they will. You have to be ripe, you have to be ready, because otherwise it just won't compute. You can't force feed a 5-year-old and make them into a full-grown adult. Okay, you're supposed to be responsible, you're supposed to be functional, you're supposed to be articulate, you're supposed to have motor skills, you're supposed to go out and get a job. Supposed to be this sitting around playing in sandboxes all day. It's an absurdity. And it's an equal absurdity to come to someone and try to explain reality to them when they aren't ready to hear it. Because they are working with reality the way that they are at that time. A kindergartner is working on being a human being in the way it's appropriate for them at that stage of unfoldment, that stage of inherent development, right? And it's foolish and irresponsible to expect them to be otherwise. And it's similar with spirituality. Spirituality is a kind of a maturing, that has its own rhythm, and people get to a certain point, maybe they're ready to deal with things in terms of different paradigms.
Is that readiness really like a physics of that, or is that just we're locked into it by means of our beliefs?
Well, you can't. How can you separate that?
Well, I'm trying to.
I don't know
this philosophical debate with another person. I was on a serious practical matter this week, but there's this concept of karma.
Right.
And then there's a concept that the truth is just like a thunderbolt that will just strike through it.
Sure.
And I was thinking in terms of the present moment. This present moment has never happened before.
Right.
So how can it be carrying these trails of dank, dark karma behind it?
Well, it isn't.
That's what.
And when you realize that, that's the thunderbolt coming through.
And can't you realize that anywhere?
Yes.
Potentially, because this present
You
moment.
can only realize it when you do.
Yeah, which would be in the present moment.
Yeah.
Which has never happened before.
Right.
So there's no karma.
Right.
So we're free.
Yeah. That's a good note. That's a good note to finish on. Thank you all so much for coming. We'll be here next Wednesday night if you're gluttons for further punishment.